Welcome to Influencers TV. I'm Rachel Maines. We're going to have a great show for you today. Up first is Corner Cafe, sharing the story and heart of an artist. And we have Petrina Pacheco back on the show. We're going to hear more about her amazing testimony. My co-host is Rachel Amadei. Here it is.
Welcome to Corner Cafe.
About the things
I worship you always. Live to love, love to live.
Well, you're lovely. We could tell you're just super humble, and we see the vibrance of your joy in the Lord. You've had quite the life testimony, so please share what you feel comfortable with us.
Sure, I'll share it. So I grew up in a real small town, and my parents, oh gosh, I think they just celebrated 55 years.
That's great.
Take a year. So I grew up in the type of, home where they raised us in church, and so we never missed a Sunday, and we were in Bible study on Wednesdays and Sunday school classes and all of that. And my parents were still together. So that's what I thought life was going to be like. That's what I thought it was everywhere until I grew up and I got old enough to go explore on my own. And then I found out the hard way that there are bad people out there.
Yeah.
And that there are people who cheat, and there are people who hit and abuse women. And it was just a totally different environment and atmosphere for me. So I ended up in a toxic relationship, and of course I wasn't aware of that from the beginning, and everybody puts on a front in the beginning, and so we started to date, and it wasn't long into the relationship that he put his hands on me, and he hurt me really bad to the point where I couldn't get out of bed the next day. And I was bruised from head to toe. Well, I was confused by that because I'd never experienced that before or seen it or understood it. I had no idea why it happened. And, of course, he told me, and I found just talking to other women who've gone through things like this, that it's a typical response to what they say is that, I made him so upset, and that what I did, and he explained to me what I did and why it upset him to the point of where he hit me. And in my mind, I guess it made sense, and I'm thinking, okay, well, I wanted a daughter, like last year, and now I'm doing the adult thing and, in a relationship, and I guess I'm not doing the right thing. I'm not, and so I'm not doing it correctly or whatever. I'm not being the best wife or, girlfriend or whatever I'm supposed to be. So he basically told me it was my fault, and the abuse started happening very early on. It was probably 2 months into the relationship, but I was also fearful of him, and I was afraid to tell anyone what I was going through because there was just, it was very controlling, and there was just a lot of fear. And so I stayed there for many, many years. It was like 8 years. And my family, they found out probably about a year into it, maybe, only because I ended up in the emergency room at one point with stitches in my face twice. He hit me in the face and split my face open, and I had to go get stitches in my face. And a friend of mine happened to be out with us the night before, and she knew that he was abusive. But when she tried to call me the next day to talk to me, she couldn't understand me because I was, mumbling because my mouth was sewn almost completely shut, trying to keep it closed because of the stitches. And so when I told her that, she called my mom, and then she told me that. She said, "You might hate me, but I had to do this," and she called my mom. So I ended up leaving, and I wasn't gone very long because he was calling me and leaving messages and saying that, if you don't come back, then I'm going to hurt your family. And he knew where my family was, and I had so much fear on me. I was thinking, I can't live with that. I can't live with the thought of something happening to my family, and maybe I could have prevented it, and maybe I could prevent it by going back and staying there. So there was just so much fear. Fear is just a tool that the enemy uses to paralyze people, and that's what I felt was that it was paralyzing. So I stayed there, and I hid it from my parents. They didn't know that I was back in the relationship, and so I just endured a lot of abuse and many hospital reports and cracked ribs, broken bones, lots of gashes and cuts all over me. And
can you two questions, because I think there's so many people who have this story. This is a common, way more common than we want to think it is, and especially even in the Christian community. Two questions for you. One, what was your community like at the time? Did you have community that you felt was strong around you, or were you fairly isolated because of the marriage that you were in, or just because maybe you didn't know how to connect to other people at that point?
So I was living probably about 45 minutes away from my parents, and they didn't know that I was back there. And I started working at this job. I was working at a casino, because down on the Gulf Coast there's lots of casinos there, and I was a cocktail waitress at one of the casinos, which was probably about an hour away from where I was living at the time. And so when I started working there, the girls ended up, they found out that he was abusing me. Well, one, because I went to work one day with the stitches in my forehead, and they saw it, and of course the bruises. I couldn't hide the bruises with my uniform, and so they started asking questions, and I said, yeah, it's true. So I had the girls there, my coworkers that was there, and they could tell that I was suffering with low self-esteem, obviously, and that I was fearful. And so they would encourage me constantly to, well, a lot of times they would say, come and stand in front of the mirror, look in the mirror, and you don't even see what we see, and that you deserve so much better than what, you're allowing yourself to go through, and you're not who he says you are, and all these things. And so they really, really helped me. I was there for about 5 years, and it was life-changing. That was like the turning point for me, is because they helped me realize that I deserved so much better than what I was, just putting up with. And so my boss at one point, she lived over in the town. It was about 45 minutes away, the same town that I was living in at the time. And we were out at a store, and I tell this often, and it's amazing how God, even back then when I didn't have a relationship with Lord, but it's like he still had his hand upon me, and he kept me from dying, basically. But so she saw us out one evening, and when I saw her in the store and we were together, I went up to her and I was like, wow, I was so happy to see her. And so, I greeted her and I introduced him to her, and so he immediately started saying, I want to talk to you about her schedule, like, he had something to do with it or whatever, like he wanted to tell her what he wanted me to, what he expected out of her to do for me, and it was just insane. So she was like, oh, okay. So whenever I thought she'd left, and I told her goodbye, we went to walk away, and I started to walk to one part of the store where some guy was whistling at me and making some kind of noise, and next thing you know, he went berserk and got in this guy's face and had him the entire store was turned around, were looking at me. It was causing such a big scene. And so I was like, I'm so glad that she's gone. Like, that would have been so embarrassing, or just, I don't know what I would have said had she not left. And so it was horrible, and it was crazy. So I left we left that evening, and there was a big fight that night because, he said that I did something to make the guy look at me. I don't know. There's all these crazy things. So I go to work the next day, and I get a phone call in the area that I was working in, and it was her, and asked for me to go to her office. So so I went up there, and I was thinking, oh, gosh, I was trying to, run over my mind. What did I do? Did I do something to get in trouble? I hope not. And so I go up to her office, and then she was like, sit down. And so I said, yes, ma'am. And she said, I need to ask you something. I said, okay. And she said, is he abusing you? Mm-hmm. And when she said that, I just put my head down and I just started crying. And I said, yes, he is. She said, I saw everything. I saw it all. Mm-hmm. She said, I had no idea you were going through that. And I just cried and cried. And she was like, listen to me. She said, when you are ready to go, she said, all you have to do is call me and let me know, and you leave. Mm-hmm. You don't have to come in here. You don't have to put in a 2-week notice. You just get out of here. Yeah. And so I had an advocate that was there for me, that was, that had my back and was praying for me, basically, to to be free from it. So I did have them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so your boss, were they a believer at that time?
Yes.
Okay, wow.
Yes. So I didn't know that at the time because I wasn't. And so, it's kind of like, I say this all the time. When I run into Christians these days, and we start talking, I'm like, it's like being in a foreign country where you just found the one person who speaks English,
Right.
And so you're like, talk to me.
Exactly.
So, back then I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
Now I do. And so when I reached out to her recently and we've been talking, and then she said to me at the time, she said, she was talking to her sister recently, and she asked her sister, she said, I never understood why, I was in a casino. She was a beverage manager at the time, and I was a Christian. Like, I didn't understand why. And then her sister said, you were there for the girls.
Right.
And so I said, you were there for me.
Absolutely.
I needed you.
Yeah.
So,
that's a beautiful
amazing
story. In that way, how God redeems us in the fear you're in, and you could have died, so his intervention in that. So describe how after that, now the Lord's drawing you, you have an advocate, a believer who's your boss, how he's drawing you in that, and how you became saved through that process.
So there was still a few years after that. I left after a really, really bad incident, really bad fight. I ended up leaving, and I went up about 10, 11 hours north of where I was living, and I just kind of went into hiding and was not around anymore, and just trying to find myself, of course, trying to cope with life, having to make the decisions on my own whenever I was so used to being controlled and told what to do. And for me to try to figure out what I need to do after that was just too much for me. So I started drinking, and I became an alcoholic, and that was how I escaped from the mental state of being I was in, and I didn't understand it until after I got saved, that even though I wasn't there physically anymore, mentally I was so trapped there. Right. And had no idea that I was trapped still. And so I felt like I was there for a lot longer than just those 8 years, Right. But so I went and I started drinking and completely lost myself. And then it just went down from there. And it was just one addiction after another, after another, after another. So I got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore. So it was either, end it all or do something different. But God used a situation with my brother. Him and I have always been really close. He's a couple years older than me. And he ended up getting arrested and going to jail. And while he was in jail, he found Jesus. And, like I say, a lot of times they find that jailhouse religion, but he truly had a relationship with the Lord. And so when he came out, I was back home at the time, and I was staying with my mom and dad, and he was too. So when he came home, he had his Bible, and he would carry it around, and he would say these things like, you got to read with me. Like, read right here. It's so good. It's so interesting. Like, there's so much in here. And I'm like, no, I'm not interested. Like, I'm not. I'm sorry. But I'm not excited about it like you are. And so he would beg me and beg me and beg me. So anyway, and he would beg everybody around him to read the Bible. He was like, I'm telling you, if you just grab a hold of it, you would get out of it what I get out of it. And I'm like, I don't think so. And so, but I was close to him, and I hated that, but I just wasn't interested. So anyway, he ended up, because nobody was there with him, he started to backslide. And when he did, he ended up going back to jail. And I was so upset with myself because I blamed myself. And I'm like, if I just would have picked up the Bible and read it with him, if I just would have read it with him, then he wouldn't have ended up back in jail, because he would have one person there who, even if I was pretending to be interested, he could have read with me. So when he went back to jail, I was devastated. So I got this bright idea that maybe if I went to church, and he heard about it, that he would pick his Bible back up, because he put it down and he said he wasn't picking it back up. And so I was like, I'll help him with that. And so I told his wife when she would go visit him, I'd say, tell him I went to church this weekend. Just to encourage him. And so she would do that. Well, the church that I was going to every now and then, this is a Spirit-filled church. It's not the church I grew up in. I grew up in the Catholic church, and my parents, my whole family was very, all of them, the big Catholic family. But I went to the church that I was going to visit, was a Spirit-filled church and non-denominational church. And I heard there was a revival that they were about to have. And I always liked the sound of revival, because this church had really good music, and it was contemporary music. It wasn't the hymns and stuff that, I grew up listening to. So I like the music, and I'm thinking revival, you're going to have really good music, lots and lots of it. So I said, I'm going to go to that. I just felt the need to go. So I went to this revival. There was a man that was from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that was there speaking. I'd never seen him before, never laid eyes on him, and he didn't know me either. So before this, because I was going every now and then at the store I was working at, my mom owned the consignment shop, and the people from the church would come in the store, and they'd say, Trina, God's got really big plans for your life, like really big plans. And I'm like, yeah, I think you got the wrong person. No, I don't think it's me. And they would say, I'm telling you, God wants to use you and use your story. And I just didn't believe it at the time. So I'm like, okay, thank you for that. Have a nice day. And so when the revival came, I said, I'm going to go ahead and go. And so as I was sitting there in the revival meeting, I was thinking to myself, if God's got big plans for me, and they say that he's the same today as he was yesterday, right, and forevermore, if they say these things, like he could still do these things that I read about, right, in the Bible, these signs like burning bush and all this stuff. So I'm like, I'm really bold with God knows I don't take hints very well. I'm one of those people that I need a sign. Yeah. Like, there's a sign, I need that. I'm one of those people. And so I'm sitting there in the service, and I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, what can I make God do, to show me that he's real and that he really has big plans for me, because I just don't believe it. And so as I was thinking, I was like, you know what, they say he could speak, he could speak through whoever. So I can make him make that man say something to me that's going to be, that'll confirm it. And so as he was sitting up there, I said, okay, God, if you really have big plans for my life and you want to use me in a big way, I said, I need you to make that man stop talking and, like, turn around and walk up to me and point his finger in my face and tell me that you have big plans for my life. And I, want you to make him do it right now. And that's kind of how it was. It was so sarcastic. And so after I said that, it was like immediately he was facing another direction. He stopped preaching, and he turned, and he just looked in my direction. And I said, oh, gosh, what's happening? And so he walks up to me, and he's holding the microphone. And I'm sitting there, and he just looks at me, and he's holding the microphone in his hand, and he points his finger in my face, and he said, girl, God has big plans for your life. He does have big plans for your life. And when he said that, I just started going, I jumped up out of my seat, and I said, oh my God. And so I tell this testimony all the time, because God, if you need him to, show himself to you and show himself real, he'll do it. Mm. So at that moment, he did exactly what I asked him to do and said word for word what I asked him to say. And I just jumped up, and I said, oh my gosh. My mom was there, and she was sitting behind me. I turned around, and I said, Mom. She goes, I've been knowing that. That's nothing new for me. I've been knowing that.
This is old news.
I was like, yeah. And so I'm like, nobody understood what happened, because it all happened in my head, right? Nobody heard it. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, oh, wow. All my doubt left. All doubt that God was real left. All that doubt was gone. And so I said, okay, I surrendered at that moment. And I said, say no more. Like, that was the biggest sign that I needed. And so I haven't looked back since then.
Wow, what an inspiring testimony. You can find out more about Petrina by going to her website, petrinapacheco.com. And if you don't know, we are listener supported. So would you pray about being one of our supporters? Here's a testimony from one of our listeners.
The biggest thing that stands out about Corner Cafe Radio is that the host, Rachel, is truly ministering to the audience. Rachel makes the audience feel uplifted and encouraged with hope and biblical principles that apply to real life. Then you get to hear about how God has been working in the lives of the guests. Corner Cafe Radio will build your faith to help you live a more victorious Christian life, and the show lets you get to know the music artist spiritually.
Well, thank you, Jeff, for that testimony. If you feel led to give, just go to our website, cornercafeentertainment.com, and click on the Donate tab. Well, many parents are concerned about their children's education. I sat down with John DeYoung and David Cooper with Front Range Christian School. They're doing education right. Here it is. And welcome back. I am with Front Range Christian School. We have the president, David Cooper, and we have John DeYoung in studio. Welcome, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
It's great to have you in studio. We've been talking for quite some time, John, about your connection with the school and what you're doing there. So let's, our listeners are familiar with you. You have your hands on a lot of pots.
Yeah.
What's up right now with what you're doing?
So what I'm doing with David Cooper, head of school, Front Range Christian School, is we're working together. I'm working with them to help their branding, marketing, and messaging and getting out there a little bit more into the community.
And you're great at that.
Thank you. Telling stories of what's going on at Front Range.
Right.
And I just love what Cooper has for the school, what his vision and mission is for the children, for the families, and for the community. And when you look at all of that, I spent time before coming into the partnership to interview a lot of people, students, family members, faculty. And what I saw was continuity in their message, continuity in impact, continuity in their stories of what Front Range is all about. So, you can't say no to that when you have something like that that's so good and everyone sort of agrees on that.
Right.
That's really, really neat. And so Cooper's done a really good job there.
Yeah. Well, I enjoyed meeting you, David, just with your heart. We had kind of like a mini interview, if you will. We didn't plan on it.
That's true.
But, I'm not a teacher, but I have a passion for education. I went to CU Boulder, loved my public school journey, if you will, but I have a concern right now with the way education's going in the United States. And I know a lot of parents do, and they want their kids to be educated, and not only that, but to have their worldview as well. So let's speak on that real quick before we get in our topic about worldview.
Oh my gosh. Okay, how long do we have?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's my whole world. I started in public schools and 16 years. And back then, the world was a little bit different. And I don't think that there's ever been any education that's been neutral. That just doesn't exist. But at least it wasn't so agenda driven as it is today.
Right.
And I think that is the significant difference. We are teaching from a Christian worldview. That idea of how do we teach kids not just what to think, but how to think.
Exactly.
And how to process what's coming at them in the world through that lens of biblical truth. Mm-hmm. And in the public schools, you've got a Christian worldview that doesn't hold to a truth.
Right.
And when you rob education of the virtue of truth, it now becomes something that's tetherless.
Right.
And it starts to lose its meaning. And so instead what we put in are a lot of flaccid philosophies. Mm-hmm. And all you can lean on then, if there is no truth, is acceptance of everything.
Right.
And so you get kids that their Christian, their worldview is not one of a Christian worldview, but one that is rooted in worldly thinking.
Right, and I call that secular humanism. That's kind of the term I use for that. Mm-hmm. Is they're just taught that, and they don't think of it as a religion, but it really is.
Oh, it is. It's secular humanism is exactly what it is, where man is put at the apex and not God.
Right.
And it's rooted in a faulty understanding of the nature of man. Right.
Right.
We know man is fallen and sinful.
Right.
And yet secular humanism sees man as the apex, and that we have goodness in us naturally, and we can create this perfect society.
Yeah.
And when that's your driver, then man becomes a thing that's exalted, and your own pleasure desires are the things that you pursue.
Right.
And we know it's broken.
Right. Yeah, and that's interesting because I have a theory here. When you take God out of education, naturally the society is going to get stupider. I can't even use that word. It's kind of irony too that you use that word, but I think that I wonder if we did going back into when that happened up until now and how the test scores have diminished and so forth, if that has a running underlying foundation of also taking God out of the school system. And we're talking about Christian scholars in this that's your goal is to make Christian scholars, people who are highly educated. They go out into society, they have a Christian worldview, but they're also going to make an impact, a positive impact in our society. This is your goal as you train up these kids.
Without a doubt. And what we're focusing on the virtues of a Christian scholar. And people that are familiar with classical education, although we're not a classical school, they'll be used to that type of verbiage, virtues. Well, virtues are those ideals. And again, if you have a society that doesn't believe in a singular truth, well, then virtues become something that aren't as valued as they once were.
That was never mentioned in my public school upbringing, the term virtue.
No.
Like, I don't think we ever used it. So, okay, this is great.
Yeah, it's very utilitarian.
Yeah.
Right? It is about what is good for you, but more importantly, what is good for society, right? We're about creating individuals that can serve the society because, frankly, that progressive agenda is saying that you're not responsible for your kids. We are.
Right.
And so the focus on education becomes something very, very different.
Right.
So for us, we want to create Christian scholars that possess virtues like faith and balance and love and firmness and beyond, and have the ability to engage with society in a way that's meaningful and in a dialogue that's respectful but firm. They can hold on to their beliefs while pursuing the truth without compromising.
Right. Wonderful. Love that. So as you're kind of countercultural within your school, you got to really fight. Perhaps I would think that, someone coming from another school into your school and the transition of that student, how does that look?
Yeah, well, it is hard, I think, for some of them. But a lot of the families are coming to us because they are finally realizing, wait a second, there is an agenda that's going on, and they're being taught things that we can't undo around our kitchen table anymore.
Right.
And so I think there is a little bit of perhaps a shock when it comes to, oh my goodness, this is what it looks like to be taught the truth. I've always said I think Christian education is superior just because we get to teach the entire truth. Right. My school, we teach evolution, right? Not because we're ardent supporters of evolution, but because a educated mind needs to understand that theory, that it's so important within our scientific community. But we don't teach as if it's dogmatic truth. Right. And I think that's a shock to some of the kids coming in going, you know what, we're not going to engage in this debate because I want to prove you wrong. What we want to do is gather around the table.
Right.
And let's dialogue so that all of us are pursuing a better understanding of the truth.
Right.
And when you engage in that manner, it changes the conversation.
And we can have full confidence as Christians that that perspective and our perspective on the Bible, we know that's truth. We know that if we allow for an environment of truth within education, eventually we're going to get to the end of the Bible's correct. We know that. In science, of course, especially evolution, for example, it's going to disagree, but we know in the end, if we had all the facts and stuff, or we just had the right thinking and education around it, it will agree with the Bible. There's some dogmatic things within Christianity, perhaps, like some things like when they have dating and all that kind of stuff that need to catch up to the Bible, perhaps, But one thing I want to say, too, is when I was in college, I took evolutionary courses and I was doing great. And one professor called on me to answer a lot of questions. Well, halfway in between my the class, if you will, I went into his his office, just, I think we were talking about paper or something, and said that I was a Christian and I'm actually a creationist view. I mean, he wants to fall off his chair, like, what? You know, but I think it's very important as Christians that we do understand the other side, so we can have an intelligent conversation, and then be able to bring in the work environment, if you're a scientist or whatnot, opening the door up to truth within that subject and letting God and His Word speak too. We're just going to have, we'll be able to invent, and scientifically, if we allow God in the equation, even more amazing things as we acknowledge Him. But we got to have the understanding of the culture for sure, and have it, because if we don't, then we don't have any conversation. And that's what the problem is right now. It's no conversation.
That's correct. We've lost our place at the table of the dialogue of the day.
Right.
Right. And if we want to get into that discourse, we need to earn the right to sit there.
Exactly.
And so we need to be scholars, and we need to be respected for our knowledge and our eloquence and our ability to communicate well. And that means we've got to be learned in those areas that we even disagree with.
Exactly.
Right. And not just shunning it and shouting it down. The days of shouting at the wind have to be over.
Exactly.
We need to be able to engage in the dialogue of the day in a meaningful way. And we do that by being great scholars. That's where it begins.
Yeah, I love that. And we gain respect. You know, in my little example, if I would have gotten a D in the course versus an A in the course and really tried to understand, well, maybe with the A, hopefully, an open door for someone to ask me, the professor in this case, hey, well, tell me about your faith, you know. I don't understand why you can understand what I'm saying, but yet disagree, you know, but, you know, so it's just a better opportunity for the kids to go out there into their professional fields and just be respected and be able to have an opinion that their colleagues will respect and perhaps even embrace as their own.
Yeah, amen to that.
Yeah. What's right now with the Christian scholars topic right now? What are some of the key things? We kind of had an umbrella idea of virtue and stuff, but what are some practical things that you guys are doing besides, you know, learning both sides of the spectrum, evolution, creationism? What are some other things that you guys do to create Christian scholars?
Wow. I guess one of the biggest things that we do is one of our primary methods. Well, I shouldn't say primary. One of our most important methods of instruction at the secondary level is academic dialogue. And it's a form of discussion, but it's a little bit different than that. We've developed about 10 rules that we follow. We give our kids pieces of literature or essays, information they have to engage in before class. They read that, they then come to class, and it's a time where it's orchestrated by the teacher but not led by the teacher, where they have to engage in a dialogue around that topic with given prompts and refer back to that text in defending it. So it's not a time to just trade opinion across the table, but to discuss the content of the text, and it trains them then. This is how we engage in dialogue with someone who maybe even we disagree with, but to do it in a way that's respectful, that is meaningful, and it's been powerful for our kids. They go on to college and they make the comment that, man, my classmates don't know how to have a dialogue around a subject. They know how to yell about it. Right. They know how to argue about it.
Exactly.
But that's their goal. Their goal is to prove their point, not to come to a place of greater understanding. Yeah. And so that's one of the practical things, obviously, that we do for our kids. Yeah. And it's a lot for us as a school. It is creating an environment where our kids feel like they have some ownership of the culture of the place. Yeah. They aren't just coming there as a number or a body. That is their school. And so they do have a meaningful voice in a lot of what happens within our hallways and our classrooms. And I think that empowers them when they leave us, that they can be instruments of change. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. I want to go back to high school now and be admitted into school. I'd have a lot of fun. I'm, kind of just thinking about my high school days and college days too. One thing I thought is when I was there is the kids haven't been taught how to have critical thinking skills. That was just something I had to kind of learn on my own, in my own environment, in my family environment, which was great, but not a lot of kids have that opportunity. We're going to continue this discussion in future shows, and we're going to have you back on the show. So thank you so much, and hey, stay tuned. We'll be back. What a great conversation.
They're going to be back next week to discuss parental rights. It's time for a break, but stay tuned.
When Jesus walked the earth 2,000 years ago, he had some pretty revolutionary ideas. Looking back on it, it's easy to side with him now. But if you'd been there, would you have been such a supporter?
Things that make you go, Your Crawford Broadcasting Company, God and Country Station.
Here are a few things for you to think about. Our money says, "In God we trust." Do you? We have freedom of religion, but do you take time to exercise it? We are one nation under God. If you don't love it, feel free to leave it. You can't pray in schools today, but you can pray for them. Hit your knees today. They can take prayer out of schools, but they can't remove God from our hearts. Just a few things to think about.
In the book of Job, we read about a man whose faith is put to the ultimate test. Job is struck with physical pain and ultimately loses everything, including his family. Yet his faith remains strong. How are you doing today with tests of your faith?
Things that make you go, Your Crawford Broadcasting Company, God and Country Station.
Welcome back to Influencers TV. Up next is Rachel Amadei, and she sat down with Krista DeYoung. Krista's married to John DeYoung. They talked about how to stay healthy in today's technological world. Here it is.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name's Rachel Amadei, and I am here on Corner Cafe interviewing an amazing woman, a dear friend of mine of many years, Krista DeYoung. Now, she is the founder of Girl Above, as well as Set Your Mind, and she also is about to have her psychology degree, master's actually in clinical counseling, specializing in family. She has some ways for us to stay healthy in this very technology-driven world where we can all get kind of sucked into social media and news and technology. And I'm telling you, when I do it, it's a real downer for my day. It also disturbs my sleep. And so I want to not do this actually as much anymore. So I thought it'd be great to bring on an expert. We're talking about health on this particular podcast a lot because I believe that the church has kind of fallen into the same issues that the world has fallen into. We are not spiritually, mentally, psychologically, or physically healthy. And we need to be, because of what God wants to do through us, what God wants to do through his church, how we're called the body of Christ for a reason. We are supposed to be a healthy body. And so Krista is my first guest on this podcast, and she's going to give us 4 or 5 ways to stay mentally and psychologically healthy with all of this media we have going on around us. Okay, Krista, I'm going to let you get to it.
Awesome. Well, in some ways, we're all kind of experts on this topic because we know exactly how it impacts us in our lives. It's just whether or not we want to pay attention to that and take it seriously. So I was just thinking of, if I could pick just 4 or 5, what would those 4 or 5 be? And the number one is being willing to establish boundaries with your technology. And I put this as number one because it would be so easy for us to not have any boundaries. Our phones are with us at all times. People are always texting us. There's always emails coming in. There's computers everywhere. Like, we wouldn't ever have to take a break from them. And some
people don't. Some people don't ever take a break from it.
If you're that person who sleeps with your phone under your pillow, or it's like, it's just with you. Or when it's missing, it feels like a part of your actual body has been cut off.
Are you saying that that's a psychological problem if that's happening to you?
Well, I think it happens to all of us. But it is. It's like this kind of detached yet very present appendage. Yes. So setting boundaries. So this would look like starting to become extremely aware of what you are feeling physically and emotionally as you're using your technology versus when you're not. And then I just think that you must take breaks. So being able to pull back from the doom scrolling, like none of us can take bad news at all times. None of us can take working at all times. Like, we need a break. Our eyeballs need a break. Our brain needs a break. Our soul needs a break. So establishing boundaries, and that looks like being able to notice when it's actually affecting you. So this year I did a 4-month I don't want to call it a cleanse, but I guess that word works.
Yeah.
Like I just wasn't on Instagram for like 4 months. And I noticed a massive shift in how present I was able to be with my family and how I saw the world in terms of like, oh, maybe this place is okay and it's habitable or whatnot. And I just was able to focus on my clients more and be more present. And if you would have told me that at the beginning of this little experiment that I did, I would have said, yeah, social media, like it's rough, but it's fine. And I challenge you to consider that maybe it's actually not fine for us and our lives. So setting boundaries would be number one.
Okay.
Number two would be kind of going a level deeper to that and getting curious about like, what is it that's actually motivating us to zone out and be on our phones or to numb out? It's a numbing strategy or a disconnecting strategy. So is like being constantly connected to work, or if you just cannot step away from something, anything, there's a reason. So asking, okay, what need is this actually meeting? Is it making me feel like I'm more in control of my life? Is it making me feel like I have some sense of like security and knowledge? Is it allowing me to, you know, avoid other problems that I have? Like, what is the role of the technology in your life and what makes it hard to step away? So the question would be, what are you avoiding? Or what are you running from? What's it protecting? Does that make sense?
Yes. Sometimes I ask myself, what could I be doing right now that would be better than this?
Yeah.
And there's usually a multitude of things that I could or should be getting done, right, according to what I actually want to do.
Right.
Because what I actually want to do actually isn't scrolling through social media. When I ask myself that question, is that really how I want to spend my time? No, it's not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's so easy though. It's become like
it's so easy.
Second nature.
Yes.
Yeah. And 20 minutes turns into an hour and then it's just.
But like, I think I like that. So it becomes second nature. And so what we need to get better at maybe is analyzing our time, analyzing our lives.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing right now? And actually asking the question objectively.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm scrolling through social media. Why am I doing this? Yeah.
And asking yourself, like, what is it that I actually need right now? And if the answer is you need rest, okay, is it restful to scroll through social media, or do you need a different kind of rest? What do you actually need? Because it's not just scrolling.
I like that. Okay. So that's like a presentness mindset in some ways.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Be present for your life.
Yes.
Okay. I like that.
For number 3, I said remembering that God is in control and being aware of like just getting caught up in the fact that it feels scary right now. Like it's a scary time. And so there's so many hypotheticals or what ifs that come into our mind, or worst case scenario, catastrophic thinking, especially when it comes to like politics or just global happenings.
Yes.
And so remembering God's in control, I'm not in control. And this would require you to ask like, okay, what is real right now? What is actually happening? And you might have to disconnect and say, okay, I am Krista. I live in Colorado. Right now, I have enough food. Right now, like I am not in the middle of a war zone. Like reminding yourself what's real and that God is in control.
Yes.
So that is very helpful.
I love that.
So being in the now, it's another presence thing. The other one, this is really tangible, but just establishing a cutoff time in the evening is pretty important to allow our bodies to sleep, our eyes to recover, our brains to get a break. So this would be establishing a reasonable time where you feel like you can disconnect from work, disconnect from your technology, and give yourself time to actually relax. So that would look like putting that piece of technology away in a different room, or putting it on airplane mode, or doing something where it's just not in your face. That will help your physical health.
Love that.
Yes. So those
I need to do that one a lot
don't we
better.
all?
A lot
Yeah.
better. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And you
tough.
think about technology, it's not just social media. It harbors everything we do for the most part.
Yeah.
It contains our work, it contains our connections with our friends. It does contain social media. It contains our homework a lot of the time. It's hard to be like, "Oh, just walk away." Because it feels like you're walking away from your
whole life.
Your life.
Yeah.
Yes. So reframing that a little, like, are we actually walking away from our life? Is that true?
And it's in fact, I believe the opposite a lot of the times.
Yeah.
You need to like walk into nature sometimes, and you need to walk into, the other people in your space in order to actually be living your life. Because we shouldn't be living to work. We work to live. And mostly the excuse is, well, I need this for work. Well, you have a whole life and a lot of relationships that are outside of that. And you're actually made for the world. You're made for nature. We weren't really made for technology. That's that didn't really come out of nature the way that we did. And so you've got to have space from it at times.
And discerning with the work thing, like what's actually an emergency versus what can wait till tomorrow. You just want to do it now. Yes. I would say a fifth thing would be to just kind of do an audit of what your technology contains. Like, what is it bringing into your life? Is it bringing in comparison? Is it bringing in anxiety? When you look at social media, is all of your stuff like about a certain topic? Is it skewed a certain direction? Is there any hope infused in there? Like, if you find that you're really anxious about, let's say, like redoing your kitchen or you just can't wait to do it, and you follow all these accounts where they have beautiful kitchens, and you like, that's a silly example, but like if you notice that it actually stirs up in you like an anxiousness or an anticipation, jealousy, do you even notice that? And are you willing to maybe unfollow those or limit your time with the HGTV kitchen? stuff like that. If it's like just being aware, and that would go for if the images that we're seeing online and how we engage with people. Do you have relationships online that are inappropriate? Just do an audit of what it's bringing into your life. Is it bringing in mistrust or doubt or comparison, all that, and then see how you can modify and adjust that.
I love it. Okay, those are great pieces of advice. I will add my own, which encompasses most of those, which is what I always harp on. Keep the Sabbath. If you just turn all of that off, if you prove to yourself that God is God in your life, your work isn't your God, technology isn't your God, social media isn't your God, prove to yourself and to the Lord and to the spiritual realm that your God, the God that you say you believe in, is your actual God, which means you trust him to take care of you when you turn your work life off for those 24 hours. If you just do that one day a week, if you can figure that out, then you're going to be able to have an understanding of how to have all those boundaries. So I always say the Sabbath is the most unbelievable habit breaker, right? Like God has given us. It's the most important habit breaker. He wants us to break those habits and to stop being slaves. Because if you can't put your phone down, if you can't put the media away, it's not serving you. You are a slave to it. That is just the truth. And God is constantly trying to bring his people out of slavery. So these are great pieces of advice for you to make sure that you're not enslaved to your technology. Would you agree with that?
Oh, totally. And if you listen to Rachel at all, the Sabbath is very important, but it's even challenged me. Like, it's a very, very good reminder, and we should do it.
It's hard. I don't do it perfectly, but you guys, I'm never going to not teach it, because we're called to go and make disciples, teaching them to obey what God has commanded. And the Sabbath comes up from Genesis to Revelation. And it's because the seventh day has meaning that is far beyond just the Sabbath day that we keep every week. It's the Sabbath rest that Yeshua wants to bring us into. It's everything about his timeline. And it was made for us as human beings because God understands our psychology there's always been something to be enslaved to. Whether you were a slave in Egypt and your employer didn't give you a day off, or whether you're enslaved to work, because that's just our natural tendency. And so we need to break free of slavery, especially to technology, because there's a lot of bigwigs making a lot of money on our enslavement here, our mental enslavement that is not bringing us joy and peace and connection and all the things I know that you love to talk about. So Krista, thank you. I love your top 4 or 5 there. I'm going to I'm going to try to put these into practice this week.
We'll see how we do.
All right, Krista, we're definitely going to have you back. Thank you all for watching Corner Cafe. Please check out all of the other amazing people providing content on this site and Rachel Maines and all that she does. But we'll have Krista back here. All right, till next time, guys.
Bye.
What a great discussion, ladies. We'll be right back.
Love. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails.
Who is God to you? Who is God to us? Is he boring? Old? Irrelevant? Is he real? Is he powerful? We tell ourselves, God is nothing more than words on a page. His power isn't real. He's small, weak, and insignificant. He doesn't understand my daily struggle. To us, he's absent, lifeless, dead. Is this truly God's character? Is he weak? Is he absent? Does God still exist? Is he real? God is more. He is more than a line or a passage. His power is not confined to words penned by man. It's real. From his mouth, the universe came to be. He is more than talk. He is action. He is by our side. He understands our pain, our struggle. Mere words cannot describe the warmth of his embrace or the shelter that he brings. He is more.
You're tuned in to Influencers TV, and we've had a great show. We want to remind you that we're going to be launching a course soon, and it's on how to have your own unique radio program. You can find out more by going to influencerstv.com and sign up to get updated when the course launches. We're going to leave you with some music, but before we do, we want to remind you that the greatest influence you can have is an impact for Jesus Christ. Until next time.
Mirror, mirror on my screen. Who's the fairest? I hope it's me. Feels so good when they believe it's really me. I need that dopamine. Can't keep this up. It's counterfeit love. No matter how much, it's never enough. This little guy is self-sabotage, turns my heart against itself. So I'm letting go, telling it no. I know who satisfies my soul, not bowing down to this idol. Lights off, I'm up in my bed. Fail the test I'm taking in my head. Doubting, asking how I did. Why can't I measure up? I built this wall I'm up against. Can't keep this up. It's counterfeit love. No matter how much, it's never enough. This little guy is self-sabotage, turns my heart against itself. So I'm letting go, telling it no. I know who said
this idol. Not bowing down to this idol. Not bowing down to this idol. I'm done with it. This idol I've made, I'm tearing it down to the ground. I'll bury it down, down, down. This little God, I'm done with it. This idol I've made, I'm tearing it down to the ground. I'll bury it. I'll bury it. This little God, self-sabotage, turns my heart against itself. So I'm letting go, telling it no. I know it satisfies my soul. Not bowing down to this idol. Not bowing down to this idol. Not bowing down to this idol. Dust bowls and tumbleweeds, cornfields and sunflower seeds. They wave at me as I drive by. The memories of all the times I tried to change you and I. If you're gonna judge me when you don't even know me, well, aren't you just a liar? And I'm through asking why. You go ahead and judge me. I don't need you to love me. All the tears that I've cried have long since up and dried. Go on and waste your time. Judge me till I die. Will I lay my roses on a grave of a man that we all tried to save? But you told